Hey guys, my name is Gloria and welcome back to my channel. It's not a wig. We have a new Stephen King book and it came out on my birthday, so I thought perfect opportunity to treat yourself. So I bought it on my birthday and it is a collection of 4 novellas of varying sort of, not genres, they're all sort of horror-ish, but they have very different themes and very different tones to them. This collection is called If It Bleeds, not the If It Bleeds we could get it Arnie kind, but the If It Bleeds as in, I think it's a term that comes from when news started to go into 24-hour news cycles and they needed things that would grab people's attention and get the most ratings. So if it bleeds, it leads means that if someone had a story that involved murder or some sort of grim, tragic accident, anything that involved blood, that would be the top news story above anything that didn't involve blood, I guess. And the name actually comes from one of the stories in the collection, which is the one that is a sequel to his novel The Outsider, which I didn't really like, but I did really like this story. So we'll get into that. So I'm just going to do a general overview of the 4 novellas. I'm not going to have any spoilers, it's spoiler free, but I will be going over the general setup, the general tone and themes of each story, and what I did and didn't like about them, because this is a review. So the first novella of the collection is called Mr. Harrigan's Phone, and it follows the story of a young boy who is paid to come and read to this old man. He's an old retired businessman and it is rumoured that he is actually either a millionaire or even a billionaire, but despite this he pays very little to the boy. The boy doesn't really mind, he likes reading the stories to the old man, but the old man as a bonus gives him a scratch card that he wins money on, and to pay him back he buys him a phone because he's very anti-technology, and originally he doesn't want the phone until he realizes that it could help him with his business stuff. So he's still into stocks and exchanges and selling and buying businesses and stuff, so he gets very into the phone, it helps him with his business, and he's very grateful to the young boy. But unfortunately he does die, and the boy's distraught over this. He ends up putting the phone with the old man in his casket as he's being buried, because at the end of his life it brought him a lot of joy at least. And in a fit of grief after the funeral, the young boy decides to call the phone just to hear the old man's voice on his answering machine again, and later he realizes that he has actually got a text reply from that phone, and hijinks ensue. So obviously the hijinks are a lot more than just hijinks. There is a darker edge to this story. I find it, in the beginning I didn't like it so much. I think it was just, it seemed to be a lot of explaining how phones work. And I know this is strange, but it seemed to be very nostalgia heavy, and there was a lot of talk of, you know, these were back in the days before we were stuck to our phones and whatnot, and the old man seemed to have a lot of predictions, correct predictions obviously, because Stephen King knew they would come true. But the old man had a lot of predictions for instance how ads, there were no ads on newspapers, so newspapers would go out of fashion because they couldn't, not out of fashion, but they wouldn't be able to pay for themselves. So a lot of those things were just they were a little bit on the nose for me, but otherwise the kid, the old man, the relationship, I think it worked really well. I think the darkness in it, it was rather interesting. It didn't go as deep as I thought it was going to, but it was still an interesting concept. And at the very end of the book, Stephen King goes into where he got the idea for that story, so that was quite interesting as well. I think for Mr. Harrigan's Phone in particular, I would only give it a 3.5. It was good. I just, you know, if he was talking about technology from the 80s or like the 70s or something, like I'm always very interested in his stories of kids in the 50s to see how they grew up and what they did. But because I think I grew up with this technology, it was just very obvious to me, which kind of a bit mean, I think. But novella number 2 is actually a very interesting one. So it's called The Life of Chuck, and it is in reverse chronological order. There are 3 different parts, and it's difficult to say too much about this because it would sort of ruin the real story of it. I really like that it was backwards though, and it is basically about the life of a man called Chuck, and it goes into territories that I wasn't expecting, but I really liked it, and I really liked that it was backwards as well. That made it sort of interesting. So I would give this, The Life of Chuck, 4 out of 5 as a novella. I thought it's a lot less dark than the other stories, but it had quite a hopeful tone to it, and it was a nice respite from the horror, I guess. The third novella in the trilogy is actually If It Bleeds, which is a sequel to The Outsider, which I think is a TV show now. I didn't really like The Outsider. I might do a video on it if I reread it. It just wasn't really my thing. But one thing I did like about The Outsider is the character of Holly Gibney. I'm sure this says a lot about me, but I felt very seen with Holly Gibney. I completely sympathise and empathise with her lack of social skills and her overthinking things, and also the amount of movies she watched. I'm constantly watching movies, so I think we're very alike in a lot of ways, so I should probably look into that. But I think Holly Gibney is a great character, and this story follows Holly Gibney as she's still a PI as she was in The Outsider, and it follows her watching a tragedy on the news and realising that there's something a little bit off about the presenter, or the news person speaking of it. There's something strange about him. She gets a bad feeling, and as she begins to investigate, it turns out that, without giving too much away, if you've read The Outsider you might get where it's going, but it's a similar darkness to The Outsider, and she has to figure out a way to confirm whether she's right or not, and to stop whatever he's doing. So it was a really good sort of mystery PI with like horror thrown in, with a bit of supernatural thrown in as well. Obviously I really liked Holly's character. She's surrounded by other characters as well that I quite liked, and I found out that she's in Mr. Mercedes and a couple of other stories as well, so I'm definitely picking up those books. But for this one, this story actually delves a lot deeper into Holly as well, into her family life and her background, so it was interesting seeing that. I would give this one 4 out of 5. Yeah, I would give this one a 4 out of 5. I really liked it. It had the darker elements to it, it had a bit of mystery, a bit of intrigue, and I really liked the characters. And the final novella in this collection is pretty much a classic Stephen King. If you've read a lot of Stephen King books, I mean, I wouldn't say that I've read a lot of them, but I've read enough to know that this is quite classic for him. It's a married man who teaches English. He is a struggling writer. He's trying to finish a story. He's got a couple of kids, and in this story, he has a real idea that he thinks is going to work, and he wants to go off to a cabin to try and get the first draft done at least. His wife doesn't want him to go because the last time he tried to write a novel, to finish a novel, he almost burnt the house down because he had a nervous breakdown and tried to burn his manuscript in his office. So a lot of people around him are skeptical that he can do this, and he wants to prove them wrong, and he's very sure that this is different from the last novel. So he goes off to a cabin to try and get this story written. I wonder if it really was a nod to the times we're living in right now, where he stops at a store and he shakes hands with a man who has a handkerchief in his hand and who is sick, and then he gets sick. I was a little worried that it was going to turn into a COVID story, but that's not the case. It's a lot stranger than that, weirdly enough. But that did sort of make me laugh at times. I don't think that this is a spoiler. Without spoiling it, he does come across a talking rat. And that's all I'm going to say about that. There's definitely more to it. You should definitely read it. That's why it's called Rat. But for this one, so this one, it was actually perfect timing for me to read it. There is a lot of either on purpose or accidental writing advice. There's a lot of going into the process of writing, and this guy's writing, and I'm sure Stephen King's sort of processes of writing as well, and it sort of did push me to want to write more myself, so it's good for that. If you're struggling with your own writing at the minute, I would say read Rat, because it might just push you to do something yourself. There's a lot of good motivation and advice in there, mixed in with, of course, a great character and a strange story. It's a lot more sort of folklore fairy tale than I've seen from King before. For this one, for this story, for Rat, I would give it 4 out of 5 as well. I thought it was really well done. It's the classic King English teacher trying to get published. A lot of these guys, they already have something published, and they already have someone who they can just email and say, hey, I've got an idea, and they're like, yeah, send it over, I'll publish that. And that's not how it works. That's not how previously unpublished people get things published. But that is Stephen King's new novella collection, If It Bleeds. I enjoyed each of the stories for their own unique sides, their unique themes and tones. I would recommend it if you're looking for a good couple of Stephen King ones. It's definitely better than Elevation, so thank you for watching. If you like what I'm doing here, you can like and subscribe down below. I will have more videos coming up this week. I'll see you in the next video.